everybody. It's so great to see everyone here. My name is Jax Kelly. I'm president of Let's Kick Ass Palm Springs, and we've got a great program today. We're going to be talking about, among other things, two great books. But we're doing this in recognition of National HIV and Aging Awareness Day, which is September 18th. And so without any further ado, I want to introduce you to our two people who are here today. Casey Charles, who is the author of this book, Undetectable, and Nicholas Snow, who is the author of this book. I want to get this right here. Life Positive, A Journey to the Center of My Heart. So both of their memoirs, and we're going to discuss so many topics that are related to HIV and aging and relating to this. And I'm going to go start with Nicholas and have him do a brief introduction.
Thank you so much, Jax. I appreciate the opportunity to be on the show with such a distinguished guest, and congratulations to you both for your tireless activism and for putting yourselves out there. That's kind of my theme, putting myself out there, using my story to make a difference. And I would consider myself a multimedia entertainment activist. There's many books behind how that all evolved. And I'm probably most known now as the creator and producer of promohomo.tv, which I describe as an online television network. And I've been living with HIV since August of 2007, so around 16 years just passed. I don't consider myself a long-term survivor, even though you might say I am. I just don't think that it's fair for me to classify myself as a long-term survivor, knowing many people who have been living with HIV since it was a death sentence, so I know that my trauma from living with HIV is very different from the trauma of someone that first knew they were HIV positive when it meant they were going to die, and the perspective they have about still being here. I'm 62 years old, and I'm recently I was laid off from a job, but also had partially accessed disability benefits. And what happened was, because the earned income disappeared, the disability benefits went up. So I'm not pressured to do something next, and I'm in a position where I can focus on my health and my well-being. And this book is just a piece of the story, and I actually have not opened it since it came out. Maybe to do a reading here and there. So I have not revisited this book until now. I also do want to say that I produced a documentary by accident. It's called Tinseltown's Queer, 30 Years Later, and it's having its world premiere at Cinema Diverse, the Palm Springs LGBTQ Film Festival, on Saturday, September 28th at 9:30 a.m. at the Palm Springs Cultural Center. And that is a look at my amazing queer television journey in the 90s. So that's what's coming up as well. And you can find me on all social media at PromoHomoTV.
Awesome. Thanks so much. We share the same birth year. I think I'm 62 years old. My diagnosis was in 2006.
Mine was 2007.
Yeah, so it's kind of similar, at least, those dates are kind of similar there. So Casey, I want to toss the ball over to you. Casey, the one thing I think that distinguishes your resume the most is that you're really an academic, and this is an interesting story. I think you point out in your story that that a typical HIV/AIDS memoir comes from different folks. I don't know if have you. Is this like the first one I've read that really addresses a personal experience from an academic?
Well, it might be. I haven't really thought about that as being my particular perspective. But yeah, it could be. I mean, I think it's curious because one of the things I wanted to mention right off the top is I'm 10 years older than both of you, and also have been HIV positive since 91, approximately. And when I seroconverted, I felt some of the same uh, well, guilt or whatever Nick went through when he goes, I got HIV in 2007, 3 decades into this pandemic. Well, I was also, like a decade into it. So I was kind of aware of same-sex practices as well, even in 91, so it's really curious that you had some of the same emotional reaction to being HIV positive. Um, but yeah, I was in the midst of getting my PhD when I seroconverted. So there's a whole layer of professionalism associated with HIV that I had to go through in terms of perseverance. And, there was, of course, the chimes at midnight that I wouldn't live past the millennium and when I first got it. So, yeah, so I had to kind of persevere under those circumstances and, and wait for the cocktail to come along, which I didn't really jump onto until about 97 when I was in Los Angeles at USC for a year, because I taught at the University of Montana for a long time until about 2020. I retired. So yeah, so my journey is involved with teaching, and but I'm also an academic in terms I've done a lot of writing about queer issues. I wrote about Shakespeare and gay studies. I've written 2 novels and poetry collection. I'm still writing poetry, and so I'm basically feel my kind of raison d'etre is writing, and I write across genres, so I don't really feel like I'm a compartmentalized essayist or novelist or memoir writer. I don't like memoirs because they're self-indulgent, but a friend of mine talked me into doing this. And I just spoke with her on the phone actually, and she finally read it. And I started out this book as an ethno-memoir, interestingly enough. And so I went around and interviewed a bunch of people in the US, in Africa, and in India. And in Brazil. And but when I finally landed a publisher, she wanted me to tell my story and not tell these other stories. Now there are some other stories. There in my book. I talk about going to Africa and going to the slums and basically interviewing a lot of women because it's very difficult to interview men with HIV in Kenya, and because of the stigma and the taboo. So basically, I wheedled out a lot of the ethno memoir part, and I just told my story. And yeah, that's kind of where the memoir landed. And
2 quick questions for you.
yeah,
One, I think you were a literature professor, or okay.
yeah.
And then the second was I think you have a website. Do you want to tell people what your website is so that they can learn more about your other pursuits, including your poetry?
Yeah. My website is caseycharles.com. And I also have a Wikipedia page, which, is not totally updated. Um, so yeah, you can go and find out more about moi if you want to
Well, we're going to talk about more about Vu
Yeah,
in terms of
he keeps using French. There was one French term he threw out that
Oh yeah, my reason for being is writing.
yeah,
Yeah,
raison d'être.
Moson d'etre or something
Yeah.
like that.
my raison d'être. But
Yeah.
I'm not fluent in French, but I'm Spanish.
Actually, I remember in your book you had a lot of other languages you were throwing in there too. So kept me going on my Google skills. So, I want to start with Nick and talking about the power of memoir and what does it mean to write a memoir? And I got the feeling because your memoir is largely driven from a diary I think you kept.
A
So
blog.
a blog. Okay,
Well,
so
actually, a private blog.
a private blog. So tell us how that evolved in a way, and going from why was it necessary for you to do a private blog, and then taking that blog and then deciding to share it with people. What is the power of memoir for you?
Well, I'm not so sure that I mean, I call it a living powerfully with HIV memoir,
Mhm.
but it looks very tightly at like a 2.5 year period. So I don't know if it necessarily classifies as a memoir. It works descriptively, I guess, but um, so I learned in the early 80s during the onset of the HIV/AIDS epidemic that the most powerful thing I had was my own voice. And I learned that from people who were dying and people who were losing their voices.
Mhm.
And that's what fueled my activism. And I had been an activist for decades by the time 2007 rolled around. I was living in Thailand, working as a foreign correspondent for my own US based website. And I was acting in movies and reporting for English language television and magazines and having this extraordinary adventure. And then through a rare slip in my own safer sex behavior, I became HIV positive. And I know now, looking back on it, that it had to do with loneliness, isolation, depression, hopelessness, a lot of things that I probably wasn't even aware I was feeling. So someone could make a decision to forego the safer sex practices for a whole myriad of reasons because we're humans. So I could have made the same decision not being depressed. I could have made the same decision living in a different country, so I don't blame this on geography, and that just is my story. And I I became positive in the month of August. I know because I ended up getting a horrible flu-like illness that knocked me on my ass for a couple weeks. And I didn't get a test at that time. I didn't get the test until January 3rd of 2008. That's when I went in for the test. Um, and I decided that I was going to go public with my story. And there was someone that I considered a friend who thought that was a terrible idea, told me I shouldn't do it. And basically, his view was that I was exploiting my HIV for fame and fortune, and basically no longer supported me. And uh, so one of the reasons I wrote this journal was because I didn't have a support system and I needed to write my existence, just write it all into reality.
Mm.
And I also wanted to defend myself. So I wanted to create a step-by-step analysis. Not an analysis. I wrote it as I lived it. I mean, the whole book is dated, there's timestamps. People who read it are experiencing it in real time, just like I did. They experience things exactly like I did. And there's some edge of your seat moments in the book. There's some heartbreaking moments. There's some lots of OMGs, I'm sure. But I wrote it to protect myself.
So the writing it the first time was a way to give yourself an opportunity to vent some of your emotions, your feelings that you really didn't have somebody to share with, so that you could actually, get them out. When you came back to those pages afterwards and thought about how they were going to be used in a publication, what was the thought process there? Was there, oh my God, I can't believe I was there, or this is so important for other people to know? What was the thought process?
Well, early into the process of keeping this journal, I thought that at one point I would publish the blog. I would publish it.
Mhm.
And at the end of the story, I end up in Palm Springs, California, where I had lived previously. And I I just feel like it's such a powerful story of what happens when you honor your own truth, and that it's hugely inspiring and very profound. And my long-term mantra has been to honor and express my life force in a way that makes a difference.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
So that's why uh, that's that's why I put it out there.
And Casey, I think you spent a lot of time in the beginning of the book talking about other people's memoirs and how you really weren't trying to write the memoir that fit into a specific box. That so I really wonder for you, what was, if you were, worried. I don't know if you were worried. I don't tell us what was going through your head when you were putting this together, because it sounded like to me that in some ways you were struggling with whether or not you thought it was important for the rest of the world to read your book. Um, and I think it may have been because you were like thinking, what is it about my story that's going to add anything to the dialogue that's out there about HIV/AIDS. Is that a correct?
I think that's true. I mean, if you go and start, thinking about, Mark Doty and Paul Manette and all of the amazing memoirs that came out of the 80s um, about AIDS, there's just a huge volume of beautiful writing associated with that. And so I really felt like, the anxiety of influence, as it were, about, and so where am I, a kind of white, middle class guy who got HIV and is still living, going to fit into that tragic story? And so the way I came out of that was, I guess in some ways a kind of cliche, but around the idea of survival. And so so I wanted the book really to be one about living with HIV long term, um, into old age or into aging, um, and having it really talk about how to overcome the obstacles in the way, rather than thinking about it as a death sentence. So I tried to move from death sentence to life sentence, as it were, but not so much sentence. I mean, but yeah, so going the struggle of the drugs, the struggle of the opportunity infections, and the struggle of living with HIV. The book is supposed to be about living with HIV, surviving with HIV, rather than facing, you know, uh, the death that was looking at us in the face in the 90s. So
Mhm.
that's kind of the way I put myself in there a little bit. And then I also tried to throw in some, humor into the book as well. The foibles of trying to, teach with herpes or whatever else you happen to have at the time.
Right. Well, we have to make light of some of these things, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because if we get too serious about the challenges that are in our life, then we'll probably succumb to, a very dark part of our existence, and actually putting some levity into things helps us to be resilient, I think. So, you know, it goes kind of, you know, to my next topic, which was coming out, because I think, you know, coming out can actually lead to some very comical storytelling as well, because, you know, we all have some kind of a struggle, whether it's with internalized homophobia or the violence or pain that our communities present to people who are coming out. And I want to stay with you, Casey, for a moment and just say, I think in your book, you seem to be pretty good about, in a way, the coming out as a gay man was relatively easy. But the coming out as HIV positive had some challenges. And I want you to, if you could for us, discuss the differences a little bit about between the two, the coming out process as a gay man and the coming out process as HIV positive.
Well, I mean, I think part of my situation around the beginning of your question had to do where I was teaching in Montana when in the 90s, where there was still a kind of sexual deviancy statute on the books in the 90s, which was, eventually overturned. But there was a kind of gay community in the 90s in Missoula, Montana, which is a college town. So it was easier for me to get involved in the gay community centers, in being on campus, maybe even teaching a queer class and stuff like that. But it was a whole nother level to come out as HIV positive in a rural state like Montana, where everyone that heard of it said, "Well, we don't have that shit in our state. That's something in California and New York." So the stigma around HIV, for lack of knowledge and for whatever other reasons, was quite more was more onerous, definitely, in Montana. But I kind of also think that your question is really important. I'm going off a little bit on this, but because I was thinking about coming out as HIV, and also aging, and how those three things are like these weird Russian dolls. I mean, in one way, you get the struggle of coming out. It doesn't have the precariousness of disease, of course, but though some people call it the gay disease. But with HIV, you can't, go get reparative therapy or even try, right? Unless you're going to get, a cell transplant or something. So they're different that way, right? I mean, HIV is a medical condition. And coming out is more of a personal decision. But then getting old is something that is, is also another, not coming out process, but another box that we find ourselves in. So, and then those boxes create parameters around who you can meet, who are your cohort, and all of the, things that, especially around HIV and gayness. And Nick talks a little bit about this in his book, but when you have to disclose, even if you're undetectable, you have to usually disclose you're HIV positive to a partner at some point. And that also sets you off, from the people that are not HIV positive. So it's, those three things are all kinds of weird struggles that relates to the isolation and loneliness that, can attach to being gay, being HIV positive, being over 60, or in my case, maybe close to 70.
It's really true that oftentimes as we age, we do go through another coming out process, and it's part of what I've described as internalized ageism, right? So we, as we came out and got rid of our internalized homophobia. In some ways, we have to recognize that we are aging people, and that has its own repercussions. I think in some cases we were all, I remember when I was in my 30s, and I was shocked when somebody called me daddy at a bar, and I was like, I'm not ready for this, daddy. So it's like, all of us here are way past, worrying about whether or not somebody's going to call us daddy in a gay bar. But it still can be jarring if you haven't come to a place in your own, in your own heart and mind about who you are as an older person. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Nicholas, I know you started at the beginning of the program talking about how you had been an activist and you had been in the entertainment world. And I suppose, like Casey, there were some issues regarding coming out as a gay man in the entertainment field as well. And that HIV put a whole nother wrinkle on whatever you were doing at the time. Do you want to say a few words about that as well?
Sure. Well, I think for me, coming out as a gay man or as someone living with HIV, it was easier for me to tell the world than one person.
Mm.
And just like now in my life, because of my own past traumas and the way they've impacted me, it's easier for me to relate to groups of people or audiences or crowds than it is for me to walk across a room and say hello to someone. Hi, how are you?
Mm.
And that compounds my own isolation and loneliness. The
Mm.
way through that is for me to own it, tell the truth about it, share it in safe spaces, and find people that get it and, connect, help, sort of make some effort to connect with me, knowing it's a challenge for me to connect with them. And, one of the things I want to talk about, which is related to the question, is that, as I mentioned, if isolation, loneliness, depression, if all of those were part of how I became positive, they're not going to disappear or go away. So I was still dealing with all of those during the whole book. And it was a very lonely process. Um, I came out also in a part of the world where there was a lot of shame and stigma around the issue. Uh, but um, I kept everything. I knew what I was going to do, and I did a lot of strategizing, and I prepared for months to come out publicly, which I did at a press conference at the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand. And that video is available on YouTube, me coming out HIV positive. And in a fairly short period of time, I became for a period of time, I was one of the most visible, openly HIV positive people in Asia.
Mm.
And and also my life didn't disappear. It's like one of the better acting opportunities I had the whole time I was there happened after this.
Mm.
So but getting back to the depression, I was so lonely and isolated and that and depressed. I actually looked up painless ways of ending my life.
Mm.
And I never acted on them, but I looked up the information. And that was 17 years ago.
Mhm. Mhm.
And when I look at what I've accomplished in the last 17 years that would never have existed had I killed myself, it's like I have long-term 12-step recovery in a variety of programs as well. And one of the things they say is you're as sick as your secrets. That doesn't mean your secrets are sick. It just means that if we're withholding things that we need to get out, it's not going to help us get healthy. So I've just as they say in the world of, I think, dance, leave it all on the floor.
Yeah.
Um I That's the way I live my life. I leave it all on the floor.
Yeah. And that's great therapy. It sounds like it's great therapy for you. And I think for some other people as well, to be able to do that. And you were blessed to have that kind of a platform that experience that actually allowed you to do that. So it's great to see that, and having known you for so many years, it's great to see how you've been thriving. And that would be really a sad thing. I mean, I think I probably known you as long as nearly as long as you've been diagnosed with HIV, and that not having you in this world would have been a really terrible thing. So I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm glad I'm here too.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about some fun stuff like disclosure. And I mean fun in the fact that because I know when I was newly diagnosed and still in the dating game, that it was really kind of, I didn't know exactly what to do in terms of disclosure. It was kind of like, well, for example, there are still states in this country where it's criminal to be HIV positive and not disclose to people, even if you are undetectable, even if you are using condoms. If somebody feels like there's a chance of being exposed, you could actually have legal consequences. But here in California, that's not the case. But still, in my head, it was kind of like, well, I have this kind of a duty to disclose. And how I handled it was oftentimes awkward. Sometimes people didn't care. Sometimes I found out that was my way of finding out that my potential partner was also HIV positive. So in hindsight, it can be kind of humorous because you're like sitting here, why was I like so upset? Why was I like saying so many things in my head? And I guess that's probably why. And sometimes did it give you an opportunity, for example, Casey, to be a little lighthearted, a little more humorous about the disclosure issue? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think it's it is kind of scary, and I have also found out people are HIV positive after I went through all the drama of disclosing, right? So you go, oh, okay. So, and it's really curious now with the undetectable designation in the mix, right? Now you think, well, if you put undetectable in my profile on Grindr or whatever you are, that's all you need to do. But people don't always read those. So you're in this place where, oh, you didn't even know I was positive, and didn't you read my, and they're not even interested. All they want to see is pictures or something. But so it can be really a weird kind of negotiation. Especially, I think being undetectable creates, not only fun, stupid stuff, but also kind of dangerous stuff because, now that I'm undetectable, does that mean I don't need to tell anybody? I don't even need to put it on my profile. I'm not sure about that. I mean, I think that's something that, we could talk about. I think there's still kind of an ethical duty. If you're HIV positive, there is still a kind of ethical injunction to let people know that, you have HIV, especially since you don't want anyone else to get it. And that's why, with Nick's thing, the guy that said he's exploiting he's exploiting HIV for his own career. Well, that's kind of stupid because in the meantime, he's answering, Planet Romeo's messages and helping people get tested and all this other stuff. So he's doing all this great work, and this guy's, getting down on his case because he's making a living doing it. It's absurd because really, the more people that we can engage with about HIV, the better. Rather than having it be in this kind of even in an undetectable closet, right? So, and I think that's the power of an HIV memoir is that you can share all the craziness that you go around with doctors and pills and therapists and friends and family and all that shit.
I don't know if you had this I think one of the things that I think it gets discussed in the HIV world is whether or not our medical providers are asking us as people who are over the age of 50 about what, how sexually active we are. And I think in some ways, when you look at statistics that still show that people over 50 are seroconverting, it seems as if maybe the conversation really hasn't gotten to people over the age of 50 about sex. Maybe our providers aren't really telling us what we should know. And I love that you're sitting here talking about Grindr, that you're over 70. It's like, why should we always assume that people over the age of 50 have stopped having sex? It's ridiculous. So I just want to applaud you for acknowledging that, as we age, we are still interested in sex. So thank you for that. Nicholas, I think in terms of, disclosure, that you did the ultimate in disclosure, right? I mean, you just put it out there. I share your frustration in a way. I think Casey also mentioned this too. One of the things I did when I was not so newly diagnosed, but pretty well into it, was that I was asked to participate in an awareness campaign by an HIV provider in Los Angeles, which required me to go on billboards across Los Angeles and declare that I'm HIV positive. And then I took that same picture and I put it on my Facebook page. And I was like dumbfounded when people didn't know that I was HIV positive. I was just like, there's billboards. It's on my Facebook page. I mean, what do you do with that? And I'm sure, did that happen to you still when you were still in Thailand? I mean, after you did this press conference and you did this huge disclosure, this global announcement, basically, was it like, you still had to just go over and over again and disclose to people who were near to you, people who you had met? I mean, what was that? Was that frustrating?
Well, no. But backtracking, I have to laugh that you wanted us to connect disclosure to light and playful or whatever you said. It's like, and I can't think of any humorous light and playful moment regarding my disclosure, even though I'm trying. But so I was communicating primarily in English language in Asia. And really, people that I would meet wouldn't have necessarily ever seen that. And it's not like I was like Jennifer Aniston and I came out. It's like I was known of, but I wasn't, I guess. And so what is a celebrity? I mean, for me, a celebrity is an inordinate amount of people know who you are because they've never met you because of your appearance in media. That is how I would classify celebrity. Now, there's degrees of it. I'm not going to, I go around all the time. People don't know about Promo Homo TV. They don't know who the hell I am. So I don't take myself too seriously. But I would continually need to disclose. I have stories in my book about times I did or did not disclose and what that was like, and how people responded. And one of the things I forgot to say is you asked me, why did I tell my story? Well, one of the huge significant reasons that I went so public was that I had someone I had known for a long time was living with HIV and never told me until after I became HIV positive. And I really felt like if there were more people, that if I had known stories about people who had become HIV positive well into the epidemic, that it could have impacted my own behavior. Now, I'll never know the answer to that. I'm the one who's responsible for my own behavior. He wasn't. Uh, and I write about this in detail in the book as well. But I wanted to save lives. I wanted to save lives by telling my story.
Mhm.
And when it comes to, I also came out as living with HIV before undetectable was a thing. And when I started medication, because of my activism, I was put on a scholarship through the Thai Red Cross under a princess fund. My journey led me to members of the royal family, my activism, and my entertainment reporting. Um, but I started taking a 2 pill a day regime, which is basically would be what is in a tripla
Mhm.
in August of 2010, and I was on a scholarship for the medication because of my activism, and I had affordable healthcare, but I didn't have any insurance. And by the way, I wasn't earning money with my activism. I was paying for it out of my own pocket, and things became incredibly financially precarious for me. And when I returned back to Palm Springs in July of 2011, I did so on airline tickets that friends had gotten for me with miles.
Mm.
Returned to Palm Springs with nothing to my name uh, but my own resourcefulness. And I returned here because I have had a friend who would allow me to sleep on his sofa if I needed it. I didn't need it. I was able to come up with other ways to live, but um, I I went way, way, way out on a limb consistently as part of this process. And I wanted to save lives, but I wanted to make my life count.
Mhm. Well, that was sounds like a very worthwhile thing to do, and I'm sure you did. I'm sure it affected people in a positive way. So, thank you for doing that. Um, the next topic I want to discuss is acceptance, and I think acceptance kind of goes into a couple of different areas, and I think I think probably the easiest thing to say about acceptance is that having written a book about yourselves, that you've come to accept everything that was written in that book. And that was a journey in acceptance. Um, but then there's also, accepting yourself, as we were discussing, as a gay man, as an aging man, as a person who has HIV. It's constantly a journey towards acceptance. And um, I wonder, since we've talked about some of those other journeys, what is the journey for each of you now? I'm going to start with Casey and say, I think we touched upon a couple of topics in terms of aging but are those part of your continuing journey of acceptance? Do you think that the journey is done? I mean, are you kind of like, I think there's some ways, as I've heard, it's not true for me, but I've heard otherwise, that some people, when they get to an age of retirement, they get to this point of, you know I'm happy where I am, I'm done, the rest of the world can keep moving. I don't know. I sense for you, Casey, that the journey is continuing. So what do you deal with in terms of acceptance going forward?
Well, you're right. I mean, I don't accept, I'm not really in a happy place around uh, my HIV status. I don't think I will ever be, and I think it's really important that we, continue to fight for, if not a cure, a vaccine, whatever is on the horizon, uh, in terms of the complications that are associated with the virus. I realize research is difficult. Um, but yeah, no, I'm not emotionally happy with my status as an HIV positive man. I mean, I can deal with it. I forget about it a lot because 2 pills at night and that's it. So, and try to fend off the, any kind of viruses that might be around. But you didn't know it's a real struggle. And one of the things my book tries to do is to overcome or at least challenge the whole idea that you reach some kind of Louise Hay uh, happiness with your just accept your life as it is and move on. And I think I've survived with HIV by being really struggling against it and trying to deal with it in a real, kind of tenacious and a fighting way. You just have to come to the next obstacle and get over it. And I don't try to sugarcoat or find any kind of religion or anything that can help me with it. That's kind of what my book does. But I think that the acceptance that I've had is that talking about HIV turned me into more political, more of an activist.
Mhm.
Whether it was with ACT UP or in Buffalo, New York, of all places, or whatever I happen to do with gay activism. So there's a way in which the HIV journey, I think, opens us up to a world of people that we like. Let's Kick Ass, for example, the group that you're part of or leading, opens up a world of people that you never would have met, or I would not have met before as an academic, right? So one of the things that's I wouldn't use the word acceptance, but the thing that's kind of made it eye-opening and enjoyable is the way it's opened up to a world of people that I would not have known before. And so I'm really thankful for that in terms of my HIV journey, both politically, emotionally, socially. It causes you to really look inside yourself and also to look outside yourself at people that you wouldn't have looked at in otherwise, So there's a kind of a silver lining, I guess, if you want to call it
That's nice.
that.
And Nicholas, it's a different challenge for you, I guess, in answering this question, because this was a book you wrote a decade ago. And it was, as you were describing, one of just a period, a very slice of, a small slice of your life, but very impactful slice of your life. And I wonder about the journey since then. And you've talked a little bit about it, but I wonder if we could talk about it in terms of acceptance, and if you're at that point where there's more work to be done, and where do you think the journey is going for you as you're a person aging with HIV?
I'm hopeful as a person
Can we
dealing
just
with,
show that on your shirt? I mean,
yeah, hopeful sexual. By the way, this, if you add .com to this word, hopeful sexual, it's a shortcut to Amazon, where this shirt is available in all sorts of styles
okay,
and
we get that
colors.
shameless plug in there.
Right, but one of the things that inspired me to do this
Mhm.
is I was looking at the whole thing about shame and stigma around just basic human sexuality and how it's imposed on all of us, regardless of our sexual orientation, by the culture in which we live. So I thought, well, let me put this on a shirt. And because in wearing this, it's playful, I connect with people, it creates authentic human connection, which is a goal, while simultaneously combating sexuality-based shame and stigma, which it does.
Mhm.
And if this became huge, I could live off of it. That hasn't happened. But see, I'm always trying to think of ways to express energy into the world that is transformative. Now, you talk about aging. I'm in this weird situation. I had some foresight. So I was born with a progressive muscular disease. It's called Nemaline myopathy.
Mhm.
It didn't really start impacting my life in a way that was noticeable to others until about the last 10 years.
Mm.
And now it's impacted the way that I walk, my ability to navigate stairs. And knowing that I was coming into the home stretch of retirement, I wanted to have higher earnings than I'd been able to achieve as a self-employed person all these years. And I wanted to be able to have better disability should I ever need it. So I went to work uh, at a major AIDS service organization, and I worked in their outpatient drug-free program, which is a great fit for me. I was in that job, and I learned that once I was in the job for more than a year, I would qualify for pre-existing conditions would qualify under the disability policies that they have. And so I started to exercise partial access to those benefits in March of 2024. And in July of 2024, I learned I was being laid off from my job. They were closing my department.
Mm.
So what happened as a result of that is that my earned income disappeared and my disability benefits went up. And I have been approved for the long-term disability, which goes until my full age of 67. Plus, the insurance company will fight for me to get Social Security disability insurance.
Mhm.
And so I'm in this situation really for the first time ever, where I have absolutely everything that I need and enough money, although I am not retired at all. I'm not retired, and I don't intend to be retired. So I fully disclose the existence of my podcast, of Promo Homo TV, of my LLC to the disability company, explaining that if I do anything for this company, it's as a volunteer. I put money into the company. It doesn't make enough to pay me anything. So everything is above board. And I'm in this position where just because it would complicate my benefits until they're all locked in and secure, I can't really go out and earn much.
Mhm.
So I'm focusing on my health and well-being and being of service. Regarding disclosure in this day and age, I've never had an app profile where I didn't disclose my HIV status. And I live in Palm Springs, California, as do you, where there is a really high visibility of LGBTQ plus folks and probably more people per capita that are openly HIV positive than perhaps anywhere else in the world, which would lead one to believe that there's not a lot of stigma against people living with HIV here, but that's not true. There's a tremendous amount of stigma against those of us who are living with HIV. It's no more prevalent than on apps. And I find myself in those environments to completely be discounted. And so many people do not understand what undetectable means. So I'm at a phase in my life, who knows how long it will last, where I'm not in those spaces and I'm really focusing on being in real world environments where I can authentically connect with other human beings.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you're in a place of gratitude right now, so that's a wonderful place to be. Um, I think in my last thing that I wanted to bring up, and I'll leave the floor to you guys if you have some comments that you'd like to add. But I'd like to. I think in my experience with Let's Kick Ass Palm Springs, there's been a number of times where our members who are witnesses to the plague years, oftentimes calling themselves long-term survivors, feel that they should tell their own story as well. And maybe they don't have the background of somebody who is in entertainment or somebody who is an academic. But I think there might be ways for people to tell their stories. And I wonder if you want to, I'll start with you, Nicholas, and say, what suggestions would you give to people who feel that they would like to tell their story?
Well, I would want them to know that they should consider ramifications of being more public.
Mm.
Um, if being public is part of how they're telling their story.
Mhm.
So, for example, a group like LKA could have a weekly writing workshop for a period of 3 months, at which point they all come together for an evening where, for a broader membership, they share their experience, strength, and hope related to their own journeys.
Mhm.
That's an example of how people could do it privately.
Mhm.
That's something that could be accessible to people all over the world with technology if you wanted or needed it to be.
Mhm.
Um,
You wrote a
on a
blog. Would you recommend writing a blog?
well, uh, I was. It never existed as a public blog. It was completely private until it became a book.
Mhm.
So I decided to go the book route. But I do I do think that, social media is huge. I wish that it didn't exist for so many different reasons, but it does. It's like a love-hate relationship. So, if someone wants to express their truth about anything in small bits and pieces, and they can be emotionally prepared and detached to responses and outcomes, social media is a good place to do it. It could be an official form of a blog, or it could be theoretically an ongoing sort of journey that you're sharing where you're reflecting on things from your past. But if someone specifically wanted to document their long-term survivor journey with living with HIV and experiencing the plague years, as they say, I think jour- e- even opening up a Word document on your computer and starting to write in it a little each day, or if you don't have a computer or the skills to use that technology, an old-fashioned pen and paper, go to the Dollar Tree, buy 5 notebooks,
Mhm.
put 4 of them on the shelf, and put one of them where you write in it a little bit a
Mhm.
little bit each day.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
Okay. Casey, your thoughts on that? And especially given what Nicholas just said about, willingness to be public about things. That's pretty honest. I mean, but as he was describing, you could always just write things in a notebook and decide at a later date whether or not you really want to go public with that. Um, or is it really what are the other obstacles that may be out there to it's kind of funny. I think as many times as I hear people say, I want my story to be told, I think there are some obstacles that we internalize in a way about, whether it's writer's block or, not wanting to be public or um, just the difficulty of facing one's own story, I think, sometimes. Not wanting to redredge the things that we've gone through in the past. Um, what suggestions would you have for somebody who's thinking about writing their story?
Well, I think writing an HIV memoir is really a kind of soul-searching and almost self-therapeutic experience. I mean, one of the things that piggybacking on the hopefulsexual.com, one of the things, HIV transmission is about sex. So when I started writing this, and my straight friends that have read the book said, "Oh, there's so many penises in here, I don't know what to do." So, and I'm going, well, if you're going to write about HIV and you're going to write about how it's transmitted, you've got to talk about, sex, which is fine with me, but not fine with everybody. So when your comment about this, the wanting to tell your story but not wanting to at the same time for confidentiality reasons or whatever, um, it seems like if you really want to write your HIV story, you're going to have to maybe have either a writing coach or a group that pushes you to be specific about recreating your life in ways that are not glossed over with nice indefinite ideas or words, right? So but I really love the idea of a kind of StoryCorps um, thing that LKA might sponsor in some ways because the roundtables are great, but they're for an hour and people, they want to tell their story, but they aren't able to really fully engage in what writing it down could be, or even writing down a snippet of it could be.
And just
So,
for letting people know in the audience who don't know what the roundtable is, it's a discussion group that we do
yeah,
at LKAPS on a weekly basis, both online and in person.
yeah. It's an hour where people share their stories and about a certain topic. But I could see that expanding into a voluntary writing group. I could also see those stories being on social media as representative of some of the members of the group. I
Mhm.
mean, it's kind of a vision thing, but it's hard to write a HIV memoir. I found it to be quite masochistic.
No.
I mean, because you have to kind of soul search. So, you have to kind of find out what you did wrong and you can critique others. Of course, that's the fun part of it. The medical community, you can make fun of doctors and therapists, and but you also have to make fun of yourself, or you have to find out about yourself and why you did it, why you did what you did, and that's kind of scary. But if people want to try it, I'm saying go for it. But you need to go for it in a certain way.
Mhm.
Good writing requires specifics, and there's no question about that. So,
Mhm.
um, anyway, those are kind of my thoughts, though I do agree with Nick that would be a great opportunity for people that want to tell their story to write.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Actually, thank you to both of you. We have Casey Charles and Nicholas Snow in their respective books, Life Positive and Undetectable. So I just want to say thank you to both of you for being with us today. I would just want to give you a couple of moments to just share some final thoughts about National HIV and Aging Day, whatever's on your mind that's related to what we've been discussing today.
Mhm.
Start with Nicholas.
Okay, then. First of all, thank you, thank you both for the fellowship, for the community, for the truth telling. We've created, thanks to Jax, this conversation that will live forever. It's digital. It's part of our collective legacies of expressing our truth, of our life forces. And uh, I know there are countless people out there who think I'm an egomaniac, a narcissist, and filled with hubris, self-obsessed, and all about me. That may not be your view, Jax, but I do know a lot of people believe that about me. And if that is their perspective, they could investigate my life and prove it. But uh, but if you look more deeply at the facts, I'm someone that has honored and expressed my life force in a way that makes a difference. And having learned in the early 80s that the most powerful thing I had was my voice and to express it consistently and powerfully, I couldn't do that without me, the vessel, the person who's expressing. And I have always, and it's 1111 right now. 1111 is my spiritual lifelong number. So I just love it that it's 1111 at the time of this recording.
Yes.
That at this moment it's 1111. So, you know, my documentary looks at the 1990s and it's screening later this month. And it's been accepted by 5 film festivals, and I got a Best First Time Director award from one of them, and I got an honorable mention from another one of them. And my goal moving forward is to continue to express my truth, to continue to preserve and expand this vast multimedia library I've created in my life, and through promohomo.tv to continue to shine the spotlight on other people. And even though I'm 62 and I have mobility issues and I'm dealing with disability, I I am focusing on having decades more in my life, and I'm looking carefully at people that are older than I am who have had some of their best chapters written. And I it's not over until it's over, and I'm down for it.
Good for you. Thank you so much. Casey, what do you got for us as a closing comment?
Closing comment is, Well, I mean, I think that for me, writing this memoir has been kind of an amazing experience in self-discovery through the medium by which I express myself most, I think, distinctly. And so I encourage people to delve into the kind of real emotional issues that are associated with HIV or being gay and aging and kind of move as sometimes I do with my friends, sometimes, but often we're just kind of skirting the surface. We're having coffee at coffee and talking about what we're doing. And I
Mhm.
think our discussion today challenges people that are HIV to really open up about emotional issues, whether it be isolation or fear of disclosure or whatever, to kind of bring that to the forefront as quickly or as to trust more in being able to get deeper into the issues that will, in some ways, I think, heal us. And I think writing can do that, but it's also me and the page, whereas interactions, it's more difficult to do that. But this discussion today, I think, will prompt the listeners to really think about how they can, deepen conversations and emotional sharing. So
Well, I'm
that's
so grateful to you, both of you, for being able to do that for us, for sharing, first of all, your books, and to share, some thoughts about where you are and how you've evolved since these books have been written. Thank you so much, and I look forward to continuing to follow your stories as they continue to evolve. And again, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Jax. Thanks a lot.
It's been an honor to be
Yeah.
here, and thank you both.
Thank
Bye.
you.